Yes, I'm still here, Hollywood. Coming up on today's episode, I never do this, but I'm going to challenge you to think back on film blockbusters and how many times you've seen them. Of course, there was Jaws, Titanic, Star Wars. I can't even remember how many times I've seen these films. And there was one movie powerhouse from 1982 that you've probably seen at least 5 times. That film made you laugh and cry and feel so strongly for a wrinkled little alien who just wanted to go home. This is Still Here Hollywood. I'm Steve Kmetko. Join me with today's guest, Mary, the mom from E.T., Dee Wallace. If you'd like to be more involved with us at Still Here Hollywood, you definitely can. Just visit patreon.com/stillherehollywood. You can support us for as little as $3 a month. You can get our episodes a day before they post anywhere else. You can see what guests will be coming up and submit questions for them. You can even tell us what stars you want us to have on as guests. You'll see what goes on before and after the episode, plus exclusive behind-the-scenes info, pics, video, and more. Again, that's patreon.com/stillherehollywood. Dee, thanks for coming by. I really appreciate
welcome.
it. I do.
I'm happy to be here.
Tell me, we're going to go back to the movie that most people remember you from or recognize you from. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
What one would... There's a finger in it. I know
yes,
that.
there is. There is. I can remember the first time I saw it. I was living in and working in Louisville, Kentucky.
Really?
Yes. And I wanted to do a story on it. And back then, they didn't send out tapes to little reporters in Kentucky. So I had a photographer come in and stand in the back of the theater and shoot some of the screen so we could use, little bits and pieces.
Oh, how
But that's
smart
neither
of
here or
you.
there. Do you remember when it came out? Do you remember the first time you saw it?
I did. I stood in line with everybody else. Yeah, over at the Cinerama Dome.
Intentionally, or because they weren't having screenings, or?
Well, we hadn't had screenings, and so I was also teaching at the time. And so a bunch of my acting students and I went over and stood in line, and of course some photographer saw me there. And then, of course, when that aired, I got calls from Universal. Dee, why didn't you tell us? We would have, So then I went over and watched it with the studio suits. I'm telling you, it was like an entirely different experience.
Really?
Well, when you see it with a lot of the executives, everybody's kind of afraid to react in any particular way because what if their boss doesn't agree? So everybody sat there. There wasn't a lot of reaction. Light applause at the end. At the Cinerama Dome, screaming and crying and standing up and applauding. And I mean, it was like a totally different experience. I'm really glad I saw it at the Dome before I had that other experience, because I think in my very naive beginning actress way, I would have thought my career was over, because there was just no reaction.
What did you think of it the first time you saw it?
That's a two-sided question.
Okay.
Because I don't know about most actors, but when the first time I watched something, everything that happened goes, you go, oh my God, that's when I had that horrible stomach ache and barely could get to the set. And oh my gosh, that's when the camera broke. And, so it takes you a couple of times to watch it. And that being said, I knew it was a hit. I could tell just from the way the audience responded that film reaches into your soul, into your heart. It surpasses some block that we have and wakes us up. You know, I had this beautiful woman come up to me when I was doing private signing, and she said, "Miss Wallace, you're a part of a miracle." Here come the tears. "You're a part of a miracle in my life." And I went, "Really? How so?" And her son was autistic, and she had never heard him speak a word. He was 10 years old. And she took him to see the re-release of E.T. And on the way home, he said every line that E.T. said in the movie. I mean, to me, that's miraculous. Can you imagine never hearing your child?
No.
And that's the kind of I have so many stories like that about how that movie has affected our lives.
Yes, I remember I went the next day again. I wanted to take a bunch of friends. You've got to see this movie. Yeah, it touched me a lot.
Well, thank you.
It touched me a great deal. And E.T.'s going to be a star.
Yeah, E.T. really is the star of the movie, and that's okay.
So you have good feelings about it, good memories, fond memories of the movie?
Let me tell you, I had to go over to, I think it was 20th at the time, and read the script behind closed doors. Back then, everybody was stealing ideas from everybody else. So the working title for E.T. was A Boy's Life, so that nobody would know it was about science fiction or aliens or any of that stuff. We went over there and I read it, and I remember calling my agent, and this is exactly what I said. "I don't know how much this is going to do for me, but I think it's going to do a lot for the world, and I want to be a part of it." You know, I think any actor will tell you you have good ones and bad ones. Making movies are hard. It's hard work, long hours, you know. And we were a family. I love those kids. I'm still in contact, well, really with all of them, not so much Drew. But, you know, we all went in and did her show a year ago, which was available on YouTube. It's just really a nice interview and was a nice reunion, you know. Loved the kids. We shot at the old studios where Gone with the Wind was shot. I walked into my dressing room, which did not have a bathroom, and I think it was the original from when they did Gone with the Wind.
Had they vacuumed?
Maybe a little. So I redecorated. I made it my own, you know. But I always make them right in. I will have my own personal bathroom.
Why not?
Well, I contracted things that you don't want because I had to use the bathroom everybody else was using. So I don't want to do that anymore.
People still must come up to you and talk to you about E.T.
E.T., Cujo, the Howling, those are always the top three.
Yeah. You were known for a while as a scream queen.
Oh, I'm still a scream queen. I'm proud of it.
Really?
Oh, you bet. Look, in that genre, I'm a scream queen. In the E.T. genre, I'm the best mom in the world. And I'm lucky that I get to cross all those boundaries. You know, I do Hallmark, I do Lifetime, I have 2 beautiful family films that I did last year coming out. And then I go right into horror. And I also have a whole other business. I'm a clairaudient channel, and I teach people self-creation. So I jokingly say I spend half of my life doing horror films and the other half of my life healing people from fear. And somehow it works out really well for me. So,
How did you get into that line of work?
I was born. You know, from the time I was a little girl, I just always got messages. I woke up, I was really, really close to my grandma. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and my poor mom, we were very poor when I was little, and my mom had to take a bus at 7 a.m. And I woke up at 2 a.m. in the morning, and I went in and I said, Mommy, something's wrong at Grandma's house. God love her. She got up and we called Grandma and nobody answered. And Grandma had a phone right by her bed. So my mom looked at me and she said, all right, Dee Dee, we'll drive over. So we drove over there. The cat had gotten up on the stove and turned all the burners on, but they hadn't lit, so it was just gas coming out. Grandma was okay. Would she be okay in the morning? Who knew? But, you know, I used to hear this voice. We lived in a duplex with my grandma, ultimately. And the stairs went up to what was my bedroom. And I would sit on those stairs to talk to my boyfriends, right? And I would hear all the time, help me. Can you help me? And I finally said, look, you don't need my help. If you just want to leave, leave. Never heard the voice again. Never heard it again. But things like that would happen to me all the time. And then I met my husband, Christopher Stone, who we acted together a lot. And he was involved in a philosophy called conceptology. So I would study that with Chris. And then I found Science of Mind Church, which is your thoughts create your life. And then I found Charles Conrad. And Charles Conrad was the acting mentor that literally changed my life. Changed my life in acting and taught me how to channel. He didn't call it that. We didn't call it that. I didn't even know I was doing it. But he taught a method where you get your energy really, really high and you throw it to the werewolf or the dog or the person that you're working with. And what that does is it opens up a channel. So you just know what to do. You literally become the character. So when I did E.T., for example, I never planned anything out, ever, which is why you got the great laugh of no penis breath chalk in my house, right? Now, if I had mentally planned that out, I would, well, mothers and, you know, they shouldn't swear in the house. But it was so real and so much more fun. The way Mary, the whole scene at the dinner table when he says he's in Mexico with Sally. I felt all these tears coming up, and I thought, oh, I don't want the kids to see me cry. So I got up and left, which was not in the script. Stephen came over to me and said, Dee, why did you get up and leave? Not in the script. And I explained to him what happened. And he looked at me and turned around to the crew and said, "You got a half an hour, build me a wall here with a sink with running water. 30 minutes. So, of course, boom, 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 it happened. So he could take me over to the sink and bring me back into that big close-up where I say he hates Mexico. All because Charles Conrad had taught me a method of trusting who I was, not Dee, but who I was. So Mary told me what to do, and I worked that way ever since.
This other thing you mentioned, conceptology?
Uh-huh.
I'm not familiar with that.
Most people aren't.
It sounds a little hocus pocus to some people.
Well, healing and channeling and clairaudience sounds hocus pocus. In actuality, religion, spirituality, and brain science are all saying the same thing. All of them. The first concept that has to be in place around self-creation is you must know what you want. I created E.T. this way. I made a whole list of everything I wanted, and I went to love, and I just put a lot of love into that. And in less than 3 months, they just called and offered me E.T. I had auditioned for used cars. But Stephen works very, very, very far ahead. And he knew he wanted someone vulnerable and naive, childlike, because he wanted everybody in the film to be childlike. Well, that's kind of sums me up, to tell you the truth. So I had 6 specialists tell me I would never have a child. She's now 36, and my grandson is 18 months.
Wow.
So, my message to everybody is don't listen to anybody else's limitations. If you have a dream, if there's something you want, commit to it and ask the universe to create it with you. And it will. It does. I'm watching your face and all the questions behind your eyes.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I'm also aware of the fact that you've made 300 and whatever movies or productions. I have other things to get to.
Okay.
Tell me about Cujo.
Oh.
That was a big hit, too.
You got an hour? Cujo is my favorite movie.
Really?
Of mine. Yeah, I just...
A rabid, was it St. Bernard? Is that what it is?
Yeah, the sweetest dog there, and he did that on purpose. The movie's very different from the book. In the movie, the dog's possessed by a demon, and the kid dies. And when they brought me aboard, I said, guys, the kid can't die, come on. It's 1980s, and you can't put everybody through what we're going to put them through. Half the people aren't going to have read the book that come to see the movie, and the producer agreed with me, and Stephen King wrote us after Cujo.
Oh, did he? I was going to ask.
And said, thank God you didn't kill the kid at the end. I've never gotten more hate mail for anything else I've done.
And he's pretty notorious for not liking movies that are made from his material. He's
very, very genuine in his beautiful comments about Cujo.
Good. How did you feel about dogs after making that movie?
Oh, my God. Okay, there were 13 dogs that played Cujo because, and this was one of my great concerns that I asked about before I took the movie, because I'm an animal activist. you can't overwork an animal. You can overwork me, which they did. But those dogs were so Carl Miller even slept in the barn with them,
Mm-hmm.
And they were wagging their tail all the time because they were taught to go after toys for their tricks, right? And so we had to tie their tails down because they were wagging them all the time. So no, Danny, who was 6 years old, thank God I got that kid, unbelievable. Neither one of us were ever afraid of the dogs. The hardest thing for me was I couldn't love on them. You can't interact with them because they bond with you then and don't watch the trainer. Oh, that was so hard for me because I'm a big doggy lover.
Me too.
But it was the hardest thing ever that I've done in my career.
Well, is it harder to do horror or drama?
What's the difference?
Okay.
For me, there's no difference. For me, the ultimate goal is to be real in the moment. And whatever that reality asks of you, that's where you have to go.
We'll be back for more in a moment. Do you remember what it was like working with Steven Spielberg? I mean, he was still fairly new compared to what he's done by now.
Yeah.
Was it hard working with him or easy?
No. He's a kid.
I've interviewed him and he seems...
he's a kid on the set with the kids. And we were all, yeah. My hardest thing about E.T. was how much we had to wait. Because Stephen wanted you on the set whether you worked or not. In case, a muse hit him, like, build a wall, you've got 30 minutes, So it was challenging for me. And I remember Stephen asked me one time if I could explain that to him. And I said, actors are like racehorses, Stephen. You pick them up from the stall and they go, oh, I'm going to run. And you take us and you groom us and you put our saddle on us and you take us to the line. And pretty soon, if we don't get to run, we just want to break the damn place down. It just builds up because people don't understand that your body and your brain go through all the chemical reactions that you do if you are truly in fight or flight. So the minute, at least the way I work, the minute you get to the set, you're pumped and you're in fight or flight. You got to act.
Ready to go.
Yeah, because you literally do always have to be ready to go. You never know when you're going to be called, ever.
What are some of the other films you did that you have fond memories of?
Oh, well, we had a very good time on the Howling. I was engaged to Christopher, who played my husband. There's a great story. Do I have time?
Yeah.
Okay, so Dan Blatt, our beloved producer, called me and he said, Dee, we've got a great cast for you. We're just still looking for your husband. I said, well, what are you looking for? He said, well, he's got to be real virile, but with a real sensitive side to him. And I went, oh my God, I'm engaged to him. And he's a well-known actor. And in the same thought, Steve, I said, if I say that, they'll never hire him, right? So I said, there's this guy I did Chips with, Christopher Smith or Stone, some S word. So they went out, they found him on his own, they called him in, He got the part. The next day, Dan calls and I pick up, and he goes, Dee, oh, you know that guy that you recommended? Well, we loved him, and we hired him. I thought I was calling his number, and I said, yeah, Dan, you are. And there's this long pause, and he goes, oh, shit. Ultimately, they were extremely happy that Christopher was there. And Chris breaks everything down. You know, he was by the book. Me, totally in the moment, whatever comes, whatever happens. So we get to the set to do this big scene, fight scene, where he has to slap me. And Joe Dante, our director, said, well, I'm sure you guys rehearsed this last night. Show me what you got. And Chris looked at him and said, I'm sorry, my leading lady doesn't rehearse. And Joe looked at me, and I went, I know how to take a stage slap. I know he knows how to give a stage slap. Let's just shoot. And we got it on the first day.
How nice.
Yeah. But I mean, we had a lot of fun, obviously, on and off screen, shooting that movie.
What could she mean by that?
Yeah, what could you possibly mean? I only play mothers, okay?
You lost Christopher while you were filming.
Yeah.
What was that circumstance like? You were in New Zealand, right?
Yeah, shooting the Frighteners.
With Peter Jackson.
Yeah, love Peter Jackson. Well, it was very hard. I had my little girl, who was not 7 yet, and my nanny with me. And they had just gone back to LA, to home. Christopher had a heart attack. I flew back, and sorry. I will always love Peter Jackson deeply for how he helped me through all that. And he said, Dee, it's family. You have to go. So I went back. They did the angioplasty. He was fine. He was an actor. He said, he called me Pupper. Pupper, go back. They're holding filming for you. Go back. I'm fine. And I looked at the doctor, and he said, he's fine. He's going home tomorrow. So I called him and flew back without my daughter. And 4 days later, a blood clot hit his heart, and he was gone.
How old was he?
And my baby found him.
Your daughter found him.
My daughter found him. And thank God my nanny was there, because she was, thank you. It was right before he turned 55.
So young.
Now, before I had met him, he had had a blood clot head aneurysm. So I guess he had a propensity for this, although the doctor cleared him, said he was okay. So that was 4 days I'd been back. And you know, it's like 14-hour flight. It takes you days to find out where you're at. So I flew back again. I put on his celebration of life, grabbed my nanny, grabbed Gabby, and we flew back again so I could finish shooting. And Peter looked at me and he said, Dee, we thought you would never be back. And I said, well, I'm from Kansas, and my mom taught me, you start a job, you finish a job no matter what. And it served me really well. I watched her live with and take care of all of us through a severely alcoholic father who ended up committing suicide. And I learned a lot of strength from my mom.
It doesn't sound as though your life at times has not been a bowl of cherries.
Not at all. But you know, that's my story. We all have our story. It's what you do with your story that matters. And I said, okay, I got a 7-year-old kid to raise. I have to go on. Do you know, 3 years ago, my little brother committed suicide, who is also an alcoholic. And my sister-in-law called Gabrielle first. She said, oh my God, don't call Mom, let me go over there. We were doing a film together. And I thought, oh, how nice, Gab's coming to pick me up, you know. And she came in and told me, and we cried together. We called the family. And I looked at her and I said, I think we need to go to work. What do you think? She said, let's go, Mom. So we went and shot the rest of the day. I think it's important to teach our kids and ourselves not to use our past challenges as our present limitations.
I have a good friend who watches this podcast, and recently he told me, you know, every time I watch, I feel like you're using it as a therapy. So please take my platform today. You're more than welcome to it.
Well, I just, you know, when we're in the public eye, I think it's important for us to teach the positive things that we've learned in life. You know, I haven't done 350, 400 films. And, you know, the biggest lesson I learned this year?
What?
Is I realized it was, and it always is, by the way, I realized it was my perspective on a lot of films that I was not being respected. And when I traced it back, it started at 4 years old with my dad. And I watched him. My dad was an amazing entrepreneur, created the first discount house in America, created those of you that fish out there, the bobber that you use to tell when a fish is on the hook. Everything he created was taken away or stolen from him by people who he trusted. And do you know that our brain is locked into most of our belief systems by 8 years old? So whatever we're verbally taught or modeled in front of us, that's the way we think the world works. And then, like the good book says, as you believe, it's delivered to you. Whatever your belief systems are, the universe has to match that, and that shows up as your life. So if you want to see the walls you're hitting as an adult, go back and go, all right, what did I hear about this? What was I taught from conception to 8 years old? You'll see the belief you need to change. It's crazy to watch. I teach it every day. I just talked to one of my clients who 3 years ago, he didn't know what to do with his life. He hated his job, blah, blah. Anyway, cut to the chase. In 3 years, getting clear about what he wanted, he has created this amazing business and just bought a whole manufacturing site to produce it. That's a lot in 3 years.
And we'll be right back. You worked with Michael J. Fox
I did.
on the
Not as much as I would have liked to on the Frighteners.
on
Yeah.
the Frighteners. At that point, were there any signs of his Parkinson's at that point?
I believe that it was just starting, and I just have faint memories of him flying back and forth, needing to fly back and forth to America to see his doctor. But there were no signs physically in his performance. I only got to do one scene with Michael. Most of mine were with Jake Busey and most of mine were with Jake. What a beautiful cast, beautiful experience. When I took my daughter back, for example, this really sums up Peter. I had to fly through the worms, so they had me in a flying apparatus like Peter Pan, and Gabrielle was on the set, and she went, "Oh, Mommy, I want to fly too." Do you know he had them build her a little thing so that she could go up and fly?
A harness?
Yeah. I mean, come on. How many directors, producers would do that? Not many.
What I'm noticing with you, correct me if I'm wrong, but despite the tears, which aren't always interpreted for what they really mean, you seem like a pretty bright, positive person.
Oh, absolutely.
Why is that? For all you've been through.
I have a book, one of my books, called Bright Light. And my daddy used to say, "You're the bright light in the family." I think I came in to hold the balance in my family. Watch over my little brother, who's 7 years younger, and my older brother was 7 years older, who was a minister for a while. And I watched my mother rally so many times. And the joyful parts, the Christmases and the Easters, and we would always have Sunday dinner with one of my grandparents. And those were better than the painful times. A lot of people use pain to assuage their guilt. So I feel guilty, so I'm going to make myself sick so I can pay for my guilt. That's why a lot of people are sick, because they're angry. Anger, according to what I know, is at the basis of all illness, especially cancer. Anger doesn't serve anybody, especially you.
Back to E.T. for a second.
Yes.
On YouTube, I saw the audition for your movie son, Henry Thomas.
Yes.
He was just incredible with the emotion that he brought to that tryout. Was that all him, or was Stephen?
Of course, Stephen worked with him. And according to Henry, who I see often and do appearances with, they kind of had a planned thing that they tried to get him to do. And then Stephen said, "Okay, kid, just go with it." And your dog's died. I think is the story. And then, and Stephen would do that on the set with the kids. Okay, Drew, now take a bite of your hamburger. Now look at Henry. Now look at Dee. Now say the line. You know, he would keep them fresh and in the moment. Well, that's the way I love to work, so I was right at home with that. I loved, now you see, I wouldn't have called that improv. I guess in the strictest sense of the word it is improv, and it's my technique.
You know, I read something about Margaret O'Brien, who was such a wonderful child actress.
Yes.
That they frequently did that with her. The movie I'm thinking of is Meet Me in St. Louis, where she had to cry so much as Judy Garland is singing "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." And it worked quite well with her. So maybe he got his idea from that.
Well, you can't rehearse and overwork kids, you know, because kids live in the moment. And if you keep trying to get them to do the same thing over and over again, it gets old, and you can tell they're acting. I mean, I can tell the first time a kid says a line in a scene if their mother rehearsed it with them. I'm not kidding, because mothers say it very different than kids say it, right? A lot of the toys in the boys' rooms were their actual toys that they brought so that they could relate to them, right? In a personal way.
There was that wonderful scene in the closet with all those toys.
Yeah.
When E.T. is made up, they put a hat on him or something, and his head goes up, and is that where Drew screams?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Boy, did she have a scream, too.
Yeah.
You know, that kid, we knew from day one she was going to be a producer and director. I'm sitting in a high director's chair, first day on set, and she comes up to me and she goes, "Hi, Dee, I'm going to sit in your lap now." And I said, "Okay, Drew, come on up." I mean, she just knew what she wanted, that one.
And she got you all together for her talk show.
Yes. It was a beautiful show, too.
Was that the first time you'd all been together since the movie?
As far as I can remember, yes.
And it's on YouTube.
Well, now, we got together for the 40th anniversary and the screening and all that, so.
Was there any moment during E.T., since that was E.T., maybe I shouldn't do this because we're going to give away a secret, or...
Oh my.
No, was there a person in that? In E.T.,
well,
was there?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Actually, there were two.
Well, he did make a mechanical shark.
Yes. Well, and there was a mechanical E.T., there was a hydraulic E.T., there was a mimist that did the close-up fingers and arm work. And there was a little boy, Matthew Demerit, who they put in upside down, and he walked on his hands, and that's how they got E.T.'s incredible walk. So, you know, and of course, Drew was, what, 4 or 6? Something.
Very young.
And so Stephen found at one point, Drew was over there talking to E.T., who was just standing up in a corner somewhere. And so from then on, Stephen made sure he had 2 guys on E.T. at all times, so that if Drew came over to talk to him, he could do his eyes or, you know, blink or raise his head up a little bit. So it would help her continue the belief that E.T. was real.
What's the last good movie you saw?
Oh my gosh. I loved Wicked, and I loved Timothy Chalamet's.
Where he played Bob Dylan?
Yeah. Oh, thought that was a beautiful film. And I like a lot of the old, we watch a lot of old films.
Turner Classic Movies?
My guy and I, yeah. I still learn a lot from watching Katharine Hepburn and the older actresses.
Who did you have the most fun working with? Who did you learn the most from?
Directorially?
No.
Oh.
Co-stars.
Wow, I've never been asked that question. Well,
I'm an original.
well, we all know that. Dudley Moore. Oh my God, I so loved working
in 10, no less.
10 with Blake Edwards, yeah.
And Bo Derek.
And Bo Derek, yeah. And I have to honestly say, my husband, Christopher Stone, we would have so much fun together, but he was so level, and he was so even. And I think I was a better actor. And he taught me how to take that and not make it so important and have fun. You know, when I did 10, my mother, years later, said, I have something to show you, Dee Dee. And she pulled out these 2 letters. She said, you wrote those to me when you were doing 10. And I read them and I went, oh my God, Mary Lewis wrote these letters. I didn't write these letters, Mary Lewis, because I was so afraid that if I got out of character, I wouldn't be able to get back in. It was my first, big film. And I learned that from Dudley, too. Dudley would say, come on, Dee, you're going with us. We're all going into town. We're going to have drinks and dinner. I danced on more tabletops with Dudley Moore than I can care to remember, but we did. He was just a kind, beautiful, talented. Again, that scene where he's playing his piano in the bar and Blake does this huge close-up of me listening. That just happened. They'd already broken the set and were taking the cameras and everything off to the next. And Dudley started playing. And I was just sitting there, and he was a master pianist.
Yes.
And I was so moved. And the tears came, and Blake walked by and went, everybody bring everything back, hurry up, get it set up, because he wanted to cover Dudley playing and me reacting. That's where the magic on the set happens, when everybody trusts each other enough to go with what's real, and then your director sees it, and then all of a sudden a moment's created that nobody even knew was there. It's so magical. It's magical. Cujo, when I hit the glass at the end of the movie and Danny's in there, well, we'd practiced it and walked through it. So Louis Teague, our director, says, all right, Dee, we're going to shoot this in slow-mo. So you have to really hit the window. You can't break it. It's all treated. Right. Third hit goes through the glass. Do I hear cut? Hell no. So I just keep going. And I pick Danny up, and I go, well, I can't drag him out. We're supposed to drag him out. I can't drag him out. There's glass there. So I do this stupid waddle and get him out of the car, still don't hear cut, run up to the door, finally hear cut. Blake runs in and goes, oh my God, are you okay? And I went, I think so. Why? Dee, your arm. Well, I'd slipped my arm going through the glass, you know. He said, I hate to ask you to do this, but this is our last day on the set. Can we wrap it with gauze before we take it to the... So we did. And we did it again. But we used the first one. Everybody was like, holy hell, she broke the glass. Everybody just froze, I think, you know. But it's a great shot. Great shot.
Dee, what question would you ask you?
Right now in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
That sounds too much like an end. And I'm not done.
Well, yeah. Who's done? People ask me all the time, when are you going to retire? I go, what the hell does that mean? I don't even know what that word means. I love my healing work. I love my acting. I love my family. I don't want to not have time for any of those things ever. I want to be, oh gosh, what's her name? Oh, that did Pippin and went back to her room.
Irene Ryan?
Yes. She did her matinee, took her bow, went back to take a nap, and left.
And that was that.
Yeah. Is there a better way to go for an actor?
No.
No.
Better than dying on stage.
Well, yeah. Wouldn't want to do that. But,
No.
you know, if you don't continue to ask what's next, you just stay here. And you're stuck. And you're never stuck unless you believe
choose to
you
be,
are.
yeah.
Yeah.
E.T. reportedly made $800 million at the box office. And
I didn't get much of it.
That was my next question.
Well, we get residuals. And we did get a courteous payment very long time ago. What I am hoping is that we all had merchandising in our contract and have not received any of that for years and years and years. And I think it would be lovely of Universal to honor that for all of us. Oh, come on. What do you want to say?
No.
All of us had it in our contract, yeah.
Merchandising,
Yeah.
payments, and those haven't happened.
Like I said, at the very beginning, we got a payment, but that it's been years and years
while,
and years
yeah.
and years. And there's a lot of merchandising out there. And at this point in all of our lives, it would financially
Help.
be a blessing, you know, for the boys. Henry's raising, I think, 3 kids. And Robert now works for the Postal Service. So I'm in the process, and this was my idea, of building an ADU onto my house so that
ADU.
additional dwelling unit,
A B&B.
so that I can move in there and my daughter and her family can come over and take over the big house. And we'll all be together and everybody wins. You know, everybody wins. And it would be lovely to have additional income to help with that. Sure. And I've already got 3 films booked. I leave next week for one to shoot before the end of June. So again,
But that's a
Very-
fast track.
very
By
blessed.
the end of June.
Very blessed.
How did they fake the rabies on Cujo?
Dear God. Well, fake blood and egg whites. So everybody had to be ready to shoot, right? Get ready, get ready, get ready, because once they put that stuff on the dog, all the dog wanted to do is
Lick it off.
lick it off, right? So, yeah. And then the trainer would go, growl, growl for your toy, growl for your, or jump for your toy, dig for your toy, dig for your, They were all trained to go after toys. There's a couple of shots that they chose to leave in when the tails are wagging, because they thought it was gleefully ominous, I think.
Gleefully ominous.
Yeah.
Some female actors we've had on, I have a tendency to ask them if aging has...
I have no belief in that.
Tell me.
I just keep working,
I noticed.
as you believe. I mean, Beatrice Straight won the Oscar at 80-something, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have any belief in that.
Jessica Tandy, I think, was even older when she won the Oscar.
Yeah. Like I said, you don't retire when you do stuff you love. And most actors love to act.
I forget who it was, but somebody famous once said, have a job that you like, and you'll never work a day in your life.
That's right. Who was that? I don't
know.
remember. It's a great quote.
Back with more in a moment. Was there ever a moment on E.T. when things didn't go right with the hydraulic or...
No.
No?
I'm sure maybe with the boys, but when I was working with E.T., I remember the first day on the set, I came into the stage door and I turned, and E.T. was standing there with 3 or 4 people around him. They were talking about something. I stopped in my tracks. It was so lifelike. You could feel his soul. It's the only way I can describe it. Carlo Rambaldi did such an amazing job, and the script was so beautiful. The only time Stephen and I parted ways creatively was there was a scene, there's a whole B story in E.T. about E.T. having a love affair with Mary, a love crush on Mary. And there's little bits of it left in there. There was a scene where he came in to put Reese's Pieces down on my bedside table as I'm asleep. Well, Mr. Spielberg wanted the sheet a little lower than I was comfortable with. And I argued my point that this was a family film. I could understand the parents smoking pot in Poltergeist, but this film was very pure to me. And it was about love. And so we ended up calling in Kathleen Kennedy and Melissa, our beautiful, amazing writer, and they went, kind of agreed with her, Stephen. So we compromised and pulled the sheet up almost to my shoulder blades, which I was okay with.
That's pretty high.
Not to a girl from Kansas.
Okay.
Who knew her grandmother was going to be watching this. You can take the girl out of Kansas. You can't take Kansas out of the girl.
They took Dorothy Gale out of Kansas. You were in Stepford Wives, right?
Oh, my God. Yeah, it was my first thing.
Very first?
Very first. I was in New York, and I had just gotten there from Kansas, and $2,000 in Kansas would last a really long time. Not so much in New York. So I went in to interview for a part-time receptionist job. And the director kept walking by, and he'd look at me, and he'd look at me. And finally he came over and he said, "Are you an actress?" I said, "I am." "You want to be in a movie?" I went, "I do." This is kind of my life. Things just happened for me. Now that's easy to say, and I always knew what I wanted. So that's how I got the part in the Stepford Wives. I think I have 2 lines, one of which is "ja," because I'm the German maid, and I am German. My maiden name is Bowers. But I learned so much on that set watching those 3 actresses. All 3 totally different, worked totally different ways, had a lot of different personal needs to be taken care of. That was the biggest gift from doing Stepford Wives. And then when I got out to LA, my acting teacher, Charles Conrad, had a lot of casting directors come in. He was one of the first people that did that. And we would put on a showcase. And from that, I got the lead in this religious film with Grant Goodeve. Do you remember Grant from
Yes,
Ada's
sure.
Enough?
I used to call him Grant Goodbody.
Yeah, he was hot.
Yeah.
He was. And so sweet. And it was a religious film. I mean, I actually had a line, "I can't marry an unsaved boy," which in the audition I said, "I can't marry an unshaved boy." Because I had so many tears in my eyes, I couldn't read the words. And the director and I became close friends. And I asked him if he could, and this was before you had a disc, he had to bring all the cans, the big cans of reels out. And I invited 10 or 11 agents. Everybody said, "Are you crazy? It's a religious film. They're going to laugh you out of the room." Only one of the people I invited didn't want me at their agency. Because you could see, it may have been religious, but you could see the work. It was very, very, very dramatic. Everybody told me, 6 specialists told me, "Can't have a baby, Dee. You'll never have a baby." I said, "Thanks for sharing. Gonna have one anyway." And she's 36, and I have my first grandson. Everybody said, "Don't go to New York. Nobody knows you. You don't know anybody." I was a school teacher at the time. I said, "Thanks for sharing. I'm going to go anyway." In less than 7 years, I started in ET. So my message to everyone is, don't accept anybody else's limitation. Because everybody will try and keep you safe and make you smaller to try and protect you. Just follow your heart and go.
Did you feel protective of Drew with the struggles she went through early on?
I felt very protective of Drew and every kid I've ever worked with while I'm on the set. Every one of them. It's why I guess I play mothers so well. You know, they just become my kid. Drew, when we had to do the scene where E.T.'s dying, she was waiting on the sound stage next to me, and I went and I said, Drew, we're going to do the scene where E.T.'s dying, but you know he's not really dying, sweetheart. He's just acting like you and Dee act. I know that. Do you think I'm stupid? So I picked her up, took her into the set, and they're ready to roll. She takes one look at E.T. and goes, he's dying! And Stephen's going, roll it. You know, that's at that age, and at Danny's age, although Danny he was like working with a 20-year-old. Fantasy and reality go in and out.
For
all
me
the
too.
Time. For you too. I knew I liked you right away.
Dee, this is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great questions.
Still Here Hollywood is a production of the Still Here Network. All things technical run by Justin Zangerly. Theme music by Brian Sanashin. And executive producer is Jim Lichtenstein.